All right, so we've taken a look at implementing or retrieving static resources. We've looked at handling GET requests, and we've looked at POST requests. So now let's take a look at how we interact with external sources. So a lot of times you'll take a Node.js service or application that you've created, and you need to go actually to some other source, right, or some other external system to get more data that you need to actually fill the request that you're trying to fill for somebody who's asking you for something. All right. So an example for this is maybe you've created some site that shows weather data for the local area. So when they request from your server, they're going to request a page that displays the weather data, but you nicely need to go out to some other service to retrieve said weather data so you can construct your dynamic page and return it back to your client. All right, so let's take a look at another simple server that we can implement to do such a thing. All right, so in this case, we're going to start with HTTP. All right, we're going to import our URL module because we need to parse our URL, and we're going to require our query string module so we can parse our query string. All right, so we're going to skip these two for right now, parse weather, get weather, and we'll hop down to creating our server. All right, so here's our server itself. All right, so my suggestion is always start with your server, then fill in the other methods as you go. All right, so here's our server. What port are we listening on? You guessed it, 8080. All right, there's our create server, and here's our callback function that is listening for requests from clients. All right, there we go. All right, what are we doing? All right, so we're going to write to the console the method that we're receiving. All right, which is either going to be a get or a request. I mean, get or a post. All right, so now we're going to check and see. Well, if it's a post, right? If it's a post, then we're going to pull the data out of the request. All right, and then we're going to parse the query string from that data that we got out of it and store it in params in the params object. All right, and then we're going to pass that to our get weather function. All right, we'll look at get weather in just a minute. All right, if it's a get, right, then we're just going to shoot, what did I do here? All right, so if it's not a post, right, then we're just going to call send response and pass the no data to it and pass the response. All right. All right. So let's take a look before we look at send response. Let's take a look at the first one, which is get weather. All right. All right. So get weather is right here. Get weather takes in the city and sends back a response. I mean the response object. So see here, we're parsing our params and we're taking the city parameter that's on it, right? Because we want the weather for a specific city. This is why we're getting it from the query string, because that request will be sent as a part of the query string. All right. Now, get weather. So since we need to send, now our server is acting as a client. So we're going to create options here. All right. We're going to pass it to the Open Weather Map API, and we're specifying the path, right? And we're appending the city that our client is requesting to the path. All right. Now we're going to construct our own HTTP request object and send it. All right. So our callback is going to take the response from the server and we're going to pass it to our parse weather function. So let's go to our parse weather. All right. Our parse weather takes the weather response, the response from the server, and our response object. Well, we're going to create an empty string. We're going to read our data from our response, and when it ends, we're going to send our response, but we're calling send response and passing it the weather data and the response object. So let's take a look at send response. All right, so send response takes the weather data and a response object. It's going to construct the page, right? So HTML head, title is going to be external example. Here's our body, and we're going to create a form that has an input for the city and then a submit button. All right. So we're sending them back the same page that allows them to put in the city or the weather or whatever, right, and submit it. All right. So if weather data, so if we have some data, so remember if we just had a get is null. So if the get is if it's null, then we're just going to send back the empty form page, right, for them to select the city. If we've already, that means that that's their first request. They haven't submitted the form. If weather data is populated, that means that they've submitted the form and we've gotten a post. All right. So we're going to append our weather info and our weather data to the page, and then finally we're going to send the entire page back. All right. So let's take a look at that in action. So we're going to say node HTTP server external. All right, so it's listening. So let's go over here. All right, so you see, here's what happened. We should see the method was a get, so that's our console.log. The method was a get, so that means that it executed this path right here, which was send response, passing null because it has no data. So our send response just constructed our page with the form on it to ask for the city, and then sent the whole page back to the client. All right. So now, if we type in the city, let's go with New York because it's probably snowing there, and send our request. Now it's going to go out to that weather service because now it's getting a post. So if we look here, in a second we should see a post. Come on, hit the post in. It's moving so slowly. That call must be a slow call. All right, so unfortunately, it looks like our request doesn't want to come back, so it's so slow. Um, but what you would see is the response is going to say, you see a post here, and then that request is going to get sent to get the city data, all right, for New York, and then it will return just that raw data that's returned back on the page, and we see the same form as well. All right, let's try something real quick. There we go. All right, so this is the response that came back from the server. It's complaining because I didn't send it a valid key or a valid API key, and sometimes you'll have to pass external APIs keys to work with them, especially like Google APIs. So in this case, they're telling us we didn't send them a valid key, so they can't give us any data. All right, let's try New York again real quick before I go. No. Oh, it errored out my server. Let's start our server back up. Yeah, it's filling my server out. All right, so that is just the essentials of it, but there's our post request that came in. All right. All right, so that is pretty much it for talking to external services. So let me know if you have any questions, and take care.